Welcome to Early Intervention Matters, the podcast that helps parents, teachers, and health professionals understand the diagnosis, treatment, care, and support of children with autism, ADHD, Tourette's, and other neurodevelopmental challenges. Your host, Dr. Iyang Takon, is a consultant neurodevelopment pediatrician, and she will provide insight through interviews, answering questions, and breaking down complicated topics. By sharing stories from parents and professionals in the field, we hope to make sense of what can be an overwhelming topic. Early intervention is crucial with children with developmental difficulties. Yes, early intervention matters. And now, here's your host, Dr. Iyang Takon.
Hello, everyone. You're welcome to Early Intervention Matters podcast. This is a neurodevelopmental podcast series hosted by myself, Dr. Iyang Takon. I'm a consultant neurodevelopmental pediatrician with experience working internationally and working in the UK in this field. So this podcast series was set up to engage members of the community, parents, families, professionals who are looking for answers to neurodivergent questions. And we hope that you would learn something or take something from the podcast series today. We've had several interesting sessions, and I hope you've been able to listen to some of them. Today, we have a very, very experienced guest. When I say experienced guest, I'm sure you would find out from the series as we go along. Well, first of all, I want to welcome her before I do the introduction. Her name is DK Jonah, popularly known as DK, and I'll be referring to her as DK throughout this podcast. So we'll welcome her first, and then I'll introduce her and give you more information about DK. You're welcome, DK.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thank you. So I met DK about 5 years ago. We met at a creative retreat, which was held in London. It was a lovely 2-day session where people from different backgrounds met together to brainstorm on our different fields of interest and look at how we could be better at making impact. And that was where I met DK. And I was quite impressed by her skills and her experience. And I felt that she was somebody I would love to speak to in more detail later. So I'm so pleased, having had some interaction over the years, that we can have her on this platform because we're going to learn a lot from her. So DK is a personal and professional development coach. She's a productivity expert, and she's the author of a forthcoming book called No Gragra, which is a practical guide to getting things done efficiently. She has a passion for helping individuals overcome obstacles and achieve their goals. She's the founder of Amplify the Gospel and the Steadfast Creative. DK is dedicated to equipping individuals with tools and resources to amplify their voices and make a meaningful impact in their communities. She's also the creator of the Commitment Circle. This is a community that helps creatives build productive and creative labels, manage their time and energy effectively. She's committed to supporting individuals on their journey to personal and professional fulfillment. Also hosts the Steadfast Creative podcast, where she shares insights and inspirations for personal and professional growth. So we're very fortunate with having her DK's profile that we have her on the platform today, and she will be sharing a lot with us, which we hope to learn from. As you know, this platform is a neurodiversity platform where we talk a lot about neurodiverse issues. And we've been talking over the past months and years of issues in children. Today we have DK, who is going to share her journey with us. She's going to share her journey through the challenges, barriers, and her journey towards getting an assessment recently and how that has impacted her life and what she's doing now with that. So I'm so happy we have DK on the platform.
Thank you so much for having me.
So DK, we look forward to learning about your journey today. So I'll first start by asking, we know that you have had an assessment recently and gotten a diagnosis, but we want to go back to the beginning and for you to take us through the sequence of events that led you seeking an assessment. Because when people hear about adults going for assessments, people always wonder why is that necessary? You know, people think more about neurodivergent issues being more important for younger children. As a pediatrician, I'm fortunate to see lots of children with their families. And it's always, we know that a lot of neurodivergent issues are heritable, and there's genetic components to it. And it's always quite interesting when I'm taking the history and getting to the point of getting the family history when you ask whether there's a parent that has the condition. Parents would say, yes, nobody had a diagnosis, but yes, so there's similar behaviors in somebody. And some parents have said, well, it's too late for us to go for an assessment. And I always spend that time to find out the details of those concerns and ask parents whether those symptoms are impairing them and just explain why it's important to get a diagnosis. It's different for different people, but I think we want to hear from you firsthand because I think this presents an opportunity to hear from you about what led to you seeking an assessment at this time when you were already an adult and already in your career. What made you go for an assessment?
Thank you so much for the question. Because for me, getting an assessment has been a journey. So I have a chronic illness. So I have a lot of chronic illnesses that I've been battling with for the past like 15, almost 20 years now. And there's something more, felt like something was missing. So in 2009, I moved to the United Kingdom and I started the journey of finding out what was wrong. And the first private doctor I met just said, "Oh, you have chronic fatigue syndrome." But as Nigerians, when you just hear certain things, you're dismissive, very dismissive of it. And then 2012, I went to India. They're like, "Oh, nothing is wrong. However, this is wrong." But there was no diagnosis. Then I got diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I was like, okay, I have a diagnosis. Then 2014, I got diagnosed with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. But in 2016, I was made to go for an in-person rehabilitation. And one of the ladies there had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. However, her husband had autism and they were told not to have kids. And then she said there is a connection between the connective tissue disorder we have and autism is on the spectrum. I just ignored it and I didn't pay attention to it, but it was at the back of my mind. And there are certain times and certain things I do that everybody will be like, this is weird. And my friend Emma will be like, go and listen to this podcast. Your brain is not slow. Your brain is actually fast. Your brain is faster than normal. So at this point in time, because of the treatments and everything I was going through for diagnosis, I couldn't assimilate new information. It was always like whenever I tried to do it, my system shut down and I didn't understand. But I just didn't give up. I kept asking for more questions, and I just knew that something wasn't right yet. And I felt there was something that was wrong with me. But in 2015, I saw a specialist when I couldn't study, and she said that my brain worked fast, but my verbal skills were my best skills. That my written skills and speaking skills were different. We're not in the same decade, so I needed a scribe to write. The Nigerian Christian in me rejected it, God forbid, but I thought I could correct it, but I already just knew verbal skills were good, so I could build on that. Another doctor said you had retained reflexes. So it's a journey of doing this. So between when I got that diagnosis about the dyslexia and learning difficulty, descriptive sensitivity disorder, to when I now started seeking for diagnosis for autism, it was 9 years. So I didn't just get this, you need to do all these other things. I just rejected it because there was the pain from fibromyalgia, the IBS, and there was so much else I was going through that at that point in time, my brain was hyper focused on, I need to get better, I need to get better. I wasn't thinking about the other aspects of my life. I just knew that I was struggling. And when I spoke to people about retained reflexes, it was kind of a rejection, dismissal, stuff that hurt. So I just felt that, let me leave that. So my friend just kept saying there are certain things you do. I listened to the Faster Than Normal podcast. I learned about executive dysfunction. I felt I had ADHD. So even when I filled the form in 2022, I just felt it's ADHD. I'm sure it's ADHD. And then I got to do my session in 2024. That's a long time. And they're like, oh, unanimous decision, you have autism. I was like, no, I have ADHD. And they're like, no, you have autism. I'm like, I don't think so. Because most of us, when we hear autism, we don't even know what it is.
Uh-huh.
We are just like very defensive. So when I'm hearing that there's a link between Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and autism that is on the same spectrum, and people are connecting mast cells activation disorder, POTS, and everything to autism, I am like, oh, what is autism? So it was kind of, it was a long journey.
Okay. For the purpose of our listeners, do you want to just explain what your Ehlers, just tell them what Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and
Okay.
the POTS means, because many people will be hearing this for the first time.
So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a connective tissue disorder. And most connective tissue disorders or most illnesses have comorbidities, so they don't just exist in isolation. And happens with the connective tissue disorder is that your joints are hypermobile, or even your lungs and certain parts of your body, every part of your body is stretchy and hypermobile. So for instance, one of my vocal cords is subluxed, and that means it's a bit bent. So what happens is your joint gets out of place. Simple things that shouldn't cause pain for you. It leads to things like chronic fatigue syndrome, which is different from being tired. It's just like you're feeling like you ran a marathon every single day. Yesterday, my heart rate was like 146 because there's a connection between all these things. Then that's Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's an autoimmune issue. It's a connective tissue disorder. So your connective tissues are not functioning the way they should. That's the simplest explanation I can give to it. Some people that have it have pain. Some people don't have pain. So I don't think there's a day I've not been in pain since I was like 14 or so. I can remember. But I've been in pain daily for that long. And I've been taking care of it by myself since I was 17 because I got into uni before it was my mom. And back in Nigeria, everything was malaria. No matter what you're going through is malaria. Then we talk about POTS. POTS is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. It has to do with your posture. It has to do with your heart rate rising above the limit with speed. So my heart rate rises and drops with so much speed that it could lead to me blacking out. So I am always like, I have vertigo. I have syncope, then I can pass out with ease. I have the chronic pain also. And there, like I said, it's easier to just say it's about my heart rate rising up and falling when I sit down and stand up. But it's much more than that. It has to do with my autonomic nervous system not functioning the way it should. So it's an autoimmune disease. So there are other autoimmune diseases that exist. But your nervous system, there is a part that is, I can't remember the right word now, but there's a part that is autonomic. That means it should work automatically. Mine, in some cases, doesn't. So when you stand up, for example, your heart rate shouldn't be that high. It should be regulated. So there's a dysregulation in my autonomic nervous system. Doc, oh my God, the explanation. Well,
Okay, that's I know you've done very well. So just to add that your autonomic system there, nerves that connect that. So those are the things that help with, like you said, your heart rate, your bowel movement. You do have your, things that are controlling that. So we've got the things that are controlling our muscles, but we also have the nerves that are controlling our important things like our heart as well. So there can be changes that can result in the kind of feelings that you've described. Okay, so what we can gather from this is that you were already dealing with a lot of, like you say, chronic illnesses right from when you were younger. So, and I can imagine your family, everybody was more focused on those chronic illnesses, that nobody would have been thinking there was another condition with you. And which is usually what happens is when people, a lot of people may focus on more physical things rather than also thinking that there might be something wrong in the way, not wrong, but something different in the way the person is expressing themselves or reacting to things. Okay, so thank you so much on that, DK, for that introduction. Now, I'm just looking at the other part. You mentioned some things like when there was discussion about autism, you didn't even want to think about it. You said, God forbid, which is a typical response from people from our part of the world. Mm. And also, you also thought that you probably had ADHD. So when you got the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, what was it in that diagnosis that then made sense to you when the doctors explained? How could you relate that to how what you were doing when you were younger? Could you pick out things from there that made you think, oh, yeah, so this explains, why I was doing this and doing that?
when they told me I had autism, I just said, okay, next. And they're like, your attitude is just like indifferent. Have you always been like this? I said, yes, once I just see facts and once I can see something, I don't need to dig deeper. I'm just like, okay, let's move on. And of what many people may see as indifferent,
Mm.
passionate but indifferent. And they're like, okay, were you like this as a child? I was like, I've always been like this. There was a time they said, "Oh, we're talking about something," and they made me realize I had a stalker, and I was like, "Oh, a stalker," and I just laughed about it and I moved on. And they said, "Have you been like this always?" I'm like, "Yes." So to me, it was just kind of pointing out to the way I have always seen myself as different. So I am an introverted introvert. I would rather be in the kitchen at a party than interacting with people. Certain things that I had already started noticing. I loved being in the dark. I love my blankets. I have blankets everywhere in my house. I stopped wearing denim. So I think because I was already going through that process and I just couldn't name it. It was just like, it has a name. Interesting. So I'm not just weird. I'm not just different. Oh, it's not just fibromyalgia that is making me want certain fabrics or to do something, but it was just kind of like a confirmation. So I told someone, so reactions, when I told someone I was going for it, and she said, oh, you're just gathering diagnosis, like you're gathering infinity stones. And that really hurt. And I was like, mm. So then we realized that I wasn't good at expressing my emotions, that I was processing things slowly, but that doesn't mean I wasn't processing it at all. So I now started understanding things like that. And when I told somebody, I was like, oh, we're talking. And I was like, oh, I got an autism diagnosis. No, it's not possible now. You. Someone was like, that's why you've always been weird. So you get different reactions from people. Some people are kind of rude about it. Some people are telling you that your acceptance of autism shows that you no longer have faith in God and that you are bringing this on yourself because you are saying, when I did my diagnosis, yeah, that means you've accepted it. And I'm like, it's not about just being defeated, but it's understanding that the way I am has always been good with God. So I started working for the brain I had rather than the brain I wish I had. And even before the diagnosis, I had already started doing that because of chronic illnesses. So to me, it wasn't really, really a big wave. It was just, first of all, numb. Oh, you have autism. I told them I didn't even Google what is autism for the first month. I just sat with it and I was just like, I have autism. Fine, no problem. So there are some times that in the past, when I think another thing that happened was in the past, when I get a diagnosis, or you have fibromyalgia, I will go deep into it. You have POTS, I will go deep into it. So then I will have so much information when I'm not able to assimilate information. I didn't want to get misinformation. Also, I wanted to get information directly from the right sources. So I was very intentional about it, but kind of indifferent. And I accepted the fact that for the first time, my being indifferent about certain things and not going deep into it doesn't mean I am not interested. It just means at that point in time, I am still processing everything. So it took me a couple of months to actually process it. But initially, I was just like, okay, fine. What next? And that was the same reaction I had when they told me I was having a stroke.
Okay.
They're like, oh, you're having a something stroke. We think that's what you're having. I was like, okay, can I go? I just wanted to get out of the place and go back to my comfort zone. And that was what was important to me at that point in time. So it's only people that are really, really close to me that have noticed things that I do. Other people, to them, they'll just be like, you're normal. Well, yesterday someone asked a question that I think I would like us to answer, that what actually is normal? I did not want to answer that question.
Yeah. So normality is a subjective term, because if you look at it, a lot of people have their quirks and personalities and all that. So it's, we can't say, yes, this is a typical description of normal. But what we can say is people who are neurodivergent with a collection of patterns of behavior where you can see those patterns are more prominent than expected, and sometimes cause what we call impairment. So somebody can have protective ways of dealing with situations, but it may not be impaired by it. So it may not be affecting them in a significant way or impacting on their health or well-being. But if you have that collection of symptoms where you get anxious so much that, yes, you're protecting yourself, but actually what people can see is different from what you are going through. So impairment you're going through, and it's impacting you in many ways more than what people can see, and also hindering you from accessing a lot of things. Then you get to that point of being called a disorder. So we're all on what we call a continuum. If you look at the curve where you say some people are right under the curve, and then you still have people on the end of the curves on either side where they're still within that, yes, universal, what you would class as query normal, but doesn't mean that they don't have things that are different with them. It's just how extreme it is and how much that is impairing. So I don't like people saying a normal person,
Mm.
because it just gives a connotation that there's a description of normal. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's beautiful what you just said, because the reason that conversation started yesterday was because someone said everybody is just getting diagnosed with autism these days, and they wanted to diagnose a child. We should be careful when we do this. And I had to step in and say that it's more than behavioral issues. If your child's teacher has observed certain things about your child, then you should listen to understand. Don't listen to judge. And because you've made up your mind, oh, our husband is an occupational therapist. I said then he should stick to his job and allow the experts to do
Yeah.
their job. The conversation now turned to, and it was like I was defending that child the way I wish someone defended me.
Yeah.
And I kept going on and explaining to them what autism was. I had to make them, then same person now said, what is normal? If you have two children in a class, one is quiet and the other one is everywhere and noisy, though which one would they say is normal, which one would they say is on the spectrum? I said both could be on the spectrum.
Yeah.
But that quiet child is a child
Yeah.
that, based on Nigerian terms, people have called Olodo, Mumu,
Yeah.
and all those words you've called that child. And that child is just on the spectrum. The way they are observing the world and their sensitivity to information around them makes them overwhelmed and shut down.
Yeah.
While the other one is also distant. And then the conversation went to, oh, it's just about being hypervigilant. And I actually wrote a blog post after that conversation because I was like, this is a conversation we need to take to the world.
Yeah.
And that's why I am very, 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 very open about it. So the work I
Yeah.
do with the NHS on mental health, learning disability, and autism. So I'm the deputy social for that. And what we want to do is kind of bridge the gap for that.
Yeah.
But it took me also going to the National Autistic Trainers Program, NATP,
Yeah.
to also start learning. So my diagnosis went straight from diagnosis to helping,
Yeah.
to understanding, and then putting myself out there. So I got diagnosed, and then they had the way I spoke about things passionately from my own experience of being
Yeah.
diagnosed as an adult, being shunned for the diagnosis, being told to pray it away,
Yeah.
being told I'm accepting what Western education is telling me. So
Yeah.
even my diagnosis, there are some people in my family that don't know about it or understand it.
Yeah.
And like when they hear me talk and they're like, oh, when did you get diagnosed with autism? It should have been something that, as a relief, I am going to talk to you people about it. But I couldn't,
Yeah.
because even my sister that is a doctor actually said she doesn't think I'm autistic growing up. I then started reminding her, as in when I was 4 and she was 2, she touched my food and I put pepper soup in her eyes.
Yeah.
Come too close to me, I pick up whatever is around me and I swing. I At school I was so reserved that my name was in the boys' register, and then they called me Dalkuru, Jonali Dalkuru. The man told me that my name was Jonali and my surname was Dalkuru, and I was adamant. So there was this strong determination that you can't tell me who I am.
Yeah.
I may not talk in this class. So every day I got flogged for not responding to Jonali. And the man was like, are you not tired of being flogged? I'm like, I wouldn't just respond. The whole class was now going, just respond. And I'm like, no. When I'm passionate about something, I go all in. And when I'm confident about something, there's no force that can change me. So I'm like hyper focused and things like that. But then all people see is that quiet girl at the corner. Oh, this girl, they act like mumu. And we hear these things, we see the reaction, but we just choose to rather keep quiet about it. So I try to make them understand that people are focusing on just one thing. As a parent, you were told your daughter may be autistic. Did you go and read what autism is about? Did you see the support that she will need? And the day before that, a friend of mine's child got diagnosed with autism. And what she was saying, and people told her not to put our child in a special school. And I said, I don't think so. I think every child is different, but you don't want to put your child in a place where they are being singled out every single day, where they have to wear a mask completely and they don't even have an identity, because that was me. I was masking completely. I did not even know who I was. So it was in silence and being alone. I started finding myself. Probably that's why my diagnosis was easier to accept. And we had a good conversation. And we think she also needs to get a diagnosis done for her. But she said everybody will. I'm like, what is your problem with everybody? It's about your child. As parents, you're an advocate for that child in front of you that does not know how to advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
And if they go through the diagnostic procedure and they are not, then you can eliminate it. Because what they were doing was kind of that lady, and the conversation went on for long. Someone has to send me a DM, say, DK, you don't really talk in this group, but there are certain topics that your head always comes up for. And I was like, this is one I will come up for. That child can't speak for themselves.
Yeah.
And then because you're an occupational therapist, another child in Canada is suffering because you're advising their parents against getting the diagnosis, because you feel that, oh, they just want to put your child on drugs and label your child. Oh, it's a cultural difference. I said, if it's a cultural difference, hear me out, and you get a diagnosis that the child is not, then you can prescribe what should be done for the child, because you can't prescribe without diagnosing what's wrong. And it's about understanding that most of us that are neurodivergent, we did not succeed in school because we were in an environment that did not help us thrive. I never saw myself as creative. Pythagoras' theorem was a difficult thing for me. When it comes to the periodic table, once I just see scientific words, my brain shuts down completely. When I sit, if you tell me to what's the full meaning of DNA, I can't pronounce it. I can't pronounce half of my medication. And now I laugh about it. I make up words. I say sacrifice instead of crucify because I have to put the words sacrifice and crucify together. When I'm writing, I'm thinking, okay, when I want to write, he was watching. I'm like, okay, is he watching or watching? Another a neurotypical person would just write straight up. I have to talk to myself before I write. So there's a thinking process in my head before I go ahead. And diagnosis for me, as my daughter, my sister is a doctor and she works in A&E, and she was like, I don't really think you are. I was like, but what do you understand about autism? And it's my lived experience. So I'm like, I have the experience of being your sister that just couldn't tell me to stand noise and everything. And that made me withdraw and go into a shell completely because I was totally different from every single person in the house. First of all, I was the only art student because as in it was just like you're going to art class basically because when I see lots of things, I shut down like I said. And when I give my brain permission to study at my pace, I can comprehend it and explain to people. And the educational system is one dimensional.
Yeah.
It's not created for us that want to let our minds flow, that want to dig deep. It's like you must respond to it this way or you failed. But you've asked me for my understanding on a social science subject, and there are no right or wrong answers. Then I give my answer, and you're like, you're wrong. But I spoke about the theories and everything from my perspective. So where is free thinking? That's the way I would be reasoning. Another person would just be like, do what the teacher wants and pass.
Yeah. So thank you so much. You've touched on quite a lot of things. You've touched on questions about how people reacted to you. And I think one thing that comes through is what typically happens that many people do not recognize what people are going through internally. So people assume that what they're saying because you're working hard to engage in those social relationships. So people don't actually realize that it's been a difficulty for you and it's only you that's been able to realize it. So just to shed light on to what we mean by autism spectrum disorder for virtue of our audience. So autism spectrum disorder is a neurodevelopmental disorder where the people have difficulties with social communication and social interaction. So where things like communicating and coming in and having free conversations with people, back and forth conversations, you're communicating verbally and non-verbally. You can use gestures. You can build your conversations on what the other person is saying and take a lead from it and follow through. Those kind of things are difficult for people with autism spectrum disorder. They struggle in social settings. They don't know how to start or a conversation sometimes. They don't know how to make it flow. There's a lot of anxiety within them when they're having these conversations and communication. It's not something that comes naturally to them. So you can, and this is what sometimes typically happens is that people have learned sometimes what is expected of them and they are using that and trying to communicate. So people then see them and say, oh, no, she can, DK can have a chat, DK can engage, but they don't know how much work and how distressing or uncomfortable that is for you. You can't read other people quite easily. You can't really read people emotions or cues, and sometimes people find it difficult to read you as well. So what happens is, people just misinterpret your reactions, and you sometimes also misinterpret other people's reactions. And then there's the sensory aspect. So the other section is what we call the repetitive behaviors and interests. So people can have their own restricted interests where they're very good at and excel at, and they might have particular ways of wanting to do things, struggle with routines, have their rituals, and struggle with sensory when there's too much sensory activities in the environment. So it's very easy for, and like you've explained quite nicely to your friend, that both the child who was being quiet in a corner and the child who was lively could both be on the spectrum. And the fact that, one person is quiet doesn't mean that that person doesn't have difficulty. And you've explained it very well. The other thing is that in our community, the typical responses you got is what I have heard some of the families I've dealt with, I've interacted with, saying things like, oh, it's not our portion, or I reject it, or that's not true, or don't let them label your child. And our faith communities sometimes do not help matters. I've had situations where in the church circle, they have told them, do not let people give your child a diagnosis. That's not true. And so this is why we've got to expose or educate our community about the fact that, you know, yes, that a child is different in the way they interact and all that doesn't mean that that child doesn't have strengths, but you need to make the environment conducive for that child. And you can only help the child when you have the tools to help the child and you understand what is wrong with the child. So everything that you have talked about are things that I've come across in our community. So just going back again, well, as a younger child, did your family ever feel that some of the behaviors that you were displaying were different?
Oh, yes. So, growing up, I didn't find it weird that I would just look at the kitchen and say, oh, I need to bring all the plates out of the cupboard and wash them. I look at the buckets and I just start washing. I just look at the kitchen and just start rearranging for noting. That's weird. I will rather do that than go out and play. And because I scored an own goal. I don't know if it was own goal or own goal. I don't even know the terminology. When we were playing football once. And I was excited that I finally got to play and score, and everybody was upset. And I am like, people don't have game spirit? That as long as the person has scored,
Mm.
it's part of the game. I did not understand that they took it serious, that it was, I still don't understand football, why people can go anywhere for football. But there are certain things that I used to do that people just found completely weird. I could just sit down and decide that I want to read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Before the school term starts, I'm studying because I already know I'll fall. So it was a combination of things that made me act the way I acted. I was just different. I was just in my own world. For me, someone asked my sister recently, how is your happy-go-lucky sister? How is she surviving in this world? And I was like, how bad was I? I'm lectured about trusting people all the time. I'm lectured about taking people on face value. When I was moving to the UK, my dad actually sat me down and gave me a lecture about not helping people with their boxes. Even if a person is old, I can wait for somebody else to come across, being careful, not being trusting. And I was just like, why? I don't see why people should not be who they say they are. I think that's why the state of the world gets me upset with politics right now, because you see politicians coming in and telling us they will do certain things. I'm like, why would you tell me you will do this and then not do it? Everybody had to learn that early. I am just learning that now and coming to terms with it in my face, and I still can't understand it. And I was just saying, you what, I'm going to maybe go on a rant this week on ChatGPT and express my emotions and see why I am acting the way I am acting. But yeah, it's just been different. People call me eccentric. Well, yes.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for shedding that light. So your family could pick out some things, but they couldn't really put their finger on it. So they felt that they needed to kind of, advise you on things, but they couldn't understand some of the behaviors. And I think that's the same for quite a lot of families who feel that sometimes they need to put in more advice, put in more support, but they just can't put their finger on what is going on. And sometimes when you try to explain that, some families find it difficult to accept that. Now, just coming to the assessment part, you've talked about some of the barriers you face accessing assessment, that people were dismissive, um, which is one of the barriers you face. it took a long while before you could actually get to the point of getting the assessment. And what other barriers do you think people face? And do you think it's harder for girls and young women to seek assessment for ASD?
It is harder for girls because girls are always taught to be on their best behavior. So no matter what, girls are, even the quiet girls are just seen as being very girly. So sometimes I went from being a tomboy phase, but I was a girly tomboy. So people could not really pin it out. And most of the ladies and most of the people I've had conversations with since I got diagnosis have said the same thing. The number of girls that get diagnosed is lower. The number of black girls that get diagnosed is even lower. So we have to look at the statistics also. If the stats are showing us that now that people are older and getting diagnoses, has showed us that the girl child is being neglected in this conversation because they're not getting that diagnosis, they're not being heard, they're not being seen, they are kind of invisible because there's an expectation from them. And it's when they act out of the ordinary and out of this, and they're on the other extreme, that their attention is paid. I always say that there are people that get away with it. The ones that are extremely quiet, the ones that don't get away with it, the ones that are very obviously loud don't get away with it. But the ones in the middle, those girls get away with it. What I mean, get away with it, they do not get attention paid to them about their diagnosis because they've learned how to fit in, they've learned how to mask, they've learned how to just survive. And that prevents them from even being heard. And even when they attempt to get a diagnosis, our culture kind of flogs things out of you, kind of tries to attempt to shape the lady's character. It's not ladylike. Is this how you act in your husband's house? So most parents, most people do not pay attention to the girl at all. And it's not just me, it's other people, and there's the statistics that have to show for this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for raising that fact about culture, because that's one of the areas that I'm very interested in how culture influences presentation of neurodivergent children, because now we're beginning to see that parents are recognizing children with neurodiversity, but our culture is such that, take for example, you shouldn't speak when you're not spoken to.
Mhm.
There's a way you have to, you can't have a back and forth conversation with people, and if you can't look people directly in the eye, so you can imagine all that being, even in somebody who has neurodiversity, won't pick that up because they would just expect that that's what's the norm for the culture.
Mhm.
So if they see a child who is not doing those things, they expect you to be doing those things. And so a neurodivergent child would not show up in that environment. And I've seen that as well in my practice where, families from minority backgrounds come in, Black and minority backgrounds come in, and you're trying to tell the parents that there's something there where the child needs to be assessed. And we get a lot of pushback from the
Mhm.
families because they just say, no, that's nothing wrong. And you can imagine most people would be interacting with people from their community as well.
Mhm.
And so there's this unexpected behavior that you're supposed to do in that setting. So if you show something different, people struggle, and you're scolded, the child is scolded
Mhm.
to behave better, whereas that child may be having some difficulty. So I
Yeah.
think the issue of culture is so important. The issue of culture, the issue of faith, in terms of how it influences presentation of children with neurodiversity in our population. And I think it's something that we really need to educate communities about, because a lot of these children eventually struggle at school. They're not getting the help and support. Some of them drop out. And we have children who would have excelled in many areas, not excelling. There was something you talked on, which you said you didn't realize you were creative initially. So when did you realize that you were creative? When was it?
When I was 20, I think 2015, when I started the podcast. There's some things that come to me naturally that I never saw as a gift. I have a BSc in international relations. I have a master's in international human resource management and international security and diplomacy. I struggled through all those degrees. I mean, kneeling down to study, it was a struggle. But the things that came to me naturally, I never saw as creative. My definition of creativity was the artist that had an amazing voice or the person that could draw. I couldn't draw a straight line to save myself. It was impossible. And then in the content age, a person that can take pictures and see things, I just couldn't see that because what I could see was what I could not do. So I was focusing on my weaknesses, not my strengths. I didn't even think there was anything good about our career. I never saw myself as someone that was a relevant tool because I was not like others. I was different. I was assimilating information in a different way. It wasn't the way the world was assimilating. It was about the way I was doing things that everybody wanted to change. So sometimes it's like they want to flog it out of you. You must conform. But deep down inside, you're not conforming in any way. You're just different. You're just struggling. And that is a big problem. So I read the book in 2014 that called The Strength Finder. And that book talked to me about working from your strengths. I was like, I don't have strength. I'm a people pleaser. I'm someone that just will avoid confrontation by any means possible. I am somebody that will keep to myself. I didn't even know I said that I was introverted. Even as an introvert, I wanted to be more extroverted. I wanted to be more like other people that people love. So that book, Strength Finder, made me see my strengths, and that was the beginning of my journey. So that's why I said my journey to diagnosis was different from others because I had started seeing certain things in myself. So that Strength Finder book kind of helped me understand that I like problems. I like problems always. I like solving problems. I like thinking about solutions. When everybody else is thinking that this is a disaster, I am seeing 5 ways to resolve the issue. So that was a strength called restorative. But I will say this, sometimes we take some of these quizzes, we get this diagnosis, but it doesn't hit us immediately because that time there's so much information coming in at the same time. Another thing that helped me was interacting with my peers. That's the period I was just in church. I then met Emma. And when I told Emma, I was like, I'm exploring the issue of creativity. I have a workshop. Please, I'm inviting you. I had no idea what I was doing. So there's this thing that I just do sometimes without overthinking, and then sometimes I overthink. So when I got into that phase where I was unable to do my PhD again. So I was already seeing myself as a failure. My dad was saying, come back to Nigeria because you are not doing anything worthwhile. Everybody was trying to convince me to do a PhD, but I realized that I couldn't function in that world. So I started just doing what was in front of me. And then people now say, oh, you're so creative. I was like, me? Then I had to define what creativity was. That was the beginning of my journey.
That's interesting. Really interesting. So you've done, did you say you're doing a PhD?
I was supposed to do a PhD, but my therapist asked me, why are you doing this PhD? What are you trying to prove to the world? I realized that one, I was trying to prove to my father that I could do a PhD and be a doctor. Secondly, I had finally started learning how to read for my brain. And then I wanted to now stop because I went from having a 1 point GP when I was reading the way every other person read to going into class, to doing those things, and I was failing, to discovering that I read on my own and hiding in places people won't find me to read, to getting a 4 point GP, to just improving myself. So I'm always on a journey of self-improvement. Then figuring out how I read, then I was unable to read. I was unable to assimilate information because I was probably burnt out or something by that time with the health. But now one thing I knew was I knew this is how I read. I knew this is how I studied. I knew this is how I did things. So it was difficult for me to see this is the part where I finally figured out academic achievement is the most important thing in this world. You need to be good at this. I am finally learning how to study, but then I can't assimilate information. In my first master's, people were camping out in my house to write their dissertation. So when I tell people what to write and they write it, it's fine. If I communicate it, I may not get the same score. And I told somebody, you're going to score 45, and this is the reason you will score 45. She scored 45.
Mm.
So I didn't know that all this time, all these things I was doing, other people were seeing creativity in it. I was just doing. So I didn't see it as creative. And sometimes when you give certain things labels, they kind of cripple your creativity and your desire to do it. I just loved doing. I just loved learning. But then I figured out that I didn't need to learn within the four walls of a classroom. I am more of a free will learner. So even if I said I don't longer wanted to go to school and learn, and what I'm doing, I'm learning every day. I'm taking classes. I'm teaching almost every other day. Another thing I discovered was I learn by teaching and by explaining on my own terms. So you've given me the syllabus. I have understood what it is. I have then explained it to people. I can't cram to save myself. The reason I don't understand accounts is because I can't comprehend why debit and credit is the way it is. My brain doesn't connect with it. I was telling somebody recently, and the person was like, that's a very stupid reason not to do it. And I was like, stupid to you, intelligent to me. On the spectrum of stupidity and intelligence, everybody does their definition. Me having the confidence to say that now is quite impressive for me, because people that meet me now and knew me as a child, they are in shock all the time, because they're like, what happened to the girl that was afraid of her shadow? What happened to that happy-go-lucky girl? She discovered herself, and then getting that diagnosis was then better for me, because I had gone through this journey of self-discovery. I had gone through the journey of understanding that I was different, and different is good. I was no longer trying to be like, that's when the introvert guide to content creation started, because first of all, I felt it was just introversion. So as someone that would rather be in the house than go, there was a time I got into trouble. My mom said we should go for a party, and they just said, oh, who will stay at home? I stayed at home, and I wasn't the one that was supposed to stay, because they wanted me out of the house at that point in time. I got into trouble. So I moved to the laundry room that was like an oven, because I wanted to be alone. I've just always loved that solitude, because I didn't know that then it was because I could control the noise, sound, and smell. As in, your podcast is the first podcast I'm doing in pitch black, because no lights, with my duvet around me. And then the smell is a smell that I like. So now I'm learning my sensory profile, which I could not define before. I was just figuring it out because I had that place to be alone without external influences. So that kind of shaped my own journey to getting a diagnosis, and now just working out daily.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure listening to this, there'll be many families or people thinking, you know, that quiet child that people thought was just quiet, is that person just quiet, or are there, behaviors that people should be looking at, that needed exploring or thinking, looking at the total picture? Because there you were, very quiet girl, introvert. Nobody would ever think about, oh, what the reason why you were doing the things you were doing. Thank you very much for sharing that. So you've touched on the benefits of getting a diagnosis. You were going through process of obviously and that it's helped you as well, and obviously the impact that you're having in your community, and how you got straight from diagnosis to sharing your story and helping other people. What support have you received since you had a diagnosis?
So the Tau Amnext Autism Center, to me, they were fantastic. So immediately after the diagnosis, they put us in sessions to discover our sensory profile, build our hospital passport, do X, Y, Z. So within the first few months before they discharged me last November, there were processes of taking me through therapy to kind of discuss certain things, so I was understanding more. It also was a process of linking me up with a career coach talking to my GP to make sure that, okay, there's some deep rooted things that I need to figure out also, and doing referrals for that, making me understand that my desire to live as an autistic person without prejudice is not going to come easy. But by sharing, by communicating, and by having an open line of communication where I could ask for help, ask for support, has been wonderful. I think sometimes it feels like an abandonment from that November. So, no, September, because now they've been taking you to classes, but they have the meetups once a month, where we meet up once a month to discuss and make changes and hear from others. There's also the health autism group. They've met and done some tactile things also. Although I've not been able to make any of those meetings because I've been having flare-ups also. And so they kind of signposted me to other places I could get support. So it was not just saying you have a diagnosis, now figure it out by yourself. But I think this time around, because I've gotten so many other diagnoses in the past 10 years within the NHS, it's been kind of a supportive, enabling environment to get you to have that soft landing with people that understand what you're going through, and then kind of to pave a way for you so that you are not just getting this diagnosis, getting all this information, because there's a lot of information that comes with diagnosis, but also understanding that there's nothing wrong with you the way you are. You've always been autistic. It's not like you caught the flu. You didn't just catch autism. It's just now that you're getting the diagnosis. Seeing other people that get diagnoses in older ages also helps, being part of that community. Because community plays a role, but sometimes because our trust has been broken and shattered when you've opened up to people, when you've unmasked. I didn't even know there was something called masking. Because sometimes when I tell people about someone, I'm so excited. The person was like, oh, I met this girl. She was so excited about you. And I'm like, I was just describing you. There was nothing more to it. So that kind of conversation and this thing, you now start hiding a part of yourself from others because you don't want to be judged. You don't want to be ridiculed. But now you're meeting people that even have more quirks than you do. And people are all just laughing about it. So that's the fact that there was signposting to the right places was fantastic. But before I got my diagnosis, I was already part of people participation. So people participation is about people that are used to have long-term illnesses, carers, and other people playing an active role in what's going on within the NHS. And in health, I joined people participation. So after COVID, it was people participation that got me out of the house. I went for a 12-week, what they call it, improv class to talk to us about simulations and working with doctors. I've been opportune through people participation to get actively involved and go and speak to doctors after simulations and tell them, okay, doctors in training, tell them, oh, this is how you should have phrased the question. It was sounding judgmental when you were talking to this person that I think after that led me to go into Queen Mary University to give a lecture to second year medical students to talk to them about the fact that when I come into a room, I already have a bias towards you because I've gone through a rigorous medical snubbing on diagnosis, misdiagnosis, rejections, dismissal. So your guards are up. You're supposed to be the expert in the room, not me. But when I bring my opinion, I'm an expert on my body and I'm explaining it to you. Sometimes it's quite dismissive and it hurts. So it's about earning trust. Then I work with the mental health, learning disability, and autism group. That was before diagnosis. As in, I was like, I have all these three. And now I'm acting as a deputy social, where we're looking at content that we can create that can kind of bring people together. Because what I've observed is I was on a panel recently and they were talking about courts for people that are for autism diagnosis for people over the age of 25. And they use some terminologies that we don't use today. So they use like it functioned all their while so alive. So why do they need support at this point in time? It's a waste of funds. And they were talking, and I just kept quiet because if I had reacted immediately, I would have. They all wouldn't have even raised my hand to discuss. What I realized is that our health and our lifestyle have been politicized, and it's now become a budget code. So then I was able to speak. I was like, you can't say high functioning and low functioning. That means that this person, they're trying to dismiss certain people. It's not, these are not terminologies we use. So people will have said, I have the wrong terminology will have been Asperger's syndrome. It's no longer categorized about that. It's about support needs. I then went on air to talk about my struggles from being able to teach people to on being unable to read, about skill regression, about the fact that you're lost when you don't have a diagnosis. You're just trying to figure it out. You're like an outcast in your body and an outcast in the world. There's no safe place for you. And I gave quite a passionate speech about it. And there was an apology. I had to have a meeting with one of the directors afterwards where she apologized. And then I told them, you're trying to cut budget. You've spoken to every single person apart from the people that have gotten diagnosis. So there's an omission in this conversation where you claim to have done research, which from all indications you did, but the person that is impacted by this daily was not considered. Their carers were not considered. The people they work with were not considered. If all these people are considered, you won't be thinking that someone that has functioned for the past 25 years of their life without a diagnosis, getting a diagnosis is the end of the world for the person. Or you're like, just continue living. Some people were quite dismissive about it. But I was given an opportunity to step into a room where I could advocate. So I do advocate for it. I have kind of changed and grown up a bit where I'm learning that we can't be silent about certain things, where the benefits cuts and all these things coming up. The people that are autistic are really scared because some of them cannot just function in a work environment at all. So it's like, oh, you can go once a week. Okay, even if they go once a week, going once a week could lead to 5 days in bed for somebody, especially because there are comorbidities with it. I don't know if I pronounce that word. I always make up my own words. But there are other things that come with being autistic. There are other things that I have also that come with being autistic. And they're like, oh, your case is different, but you're also being dismissive. Oh, the person can have a conversation. The person went for a party. The person is just trying to live their life. And we are punishing them for having the mind that they have, the body that they have, the traits that they have, just because they appear in quote normal. And that's a conversation the world claims to applaud, but the actions and where the donations are going doesn't show that. It shows that it's a weapon being used by political parties to say, oh, I am doing this, I am doing that, where things are being eliminated without a backup plan, where the rug is just being pulled off from people that are really discovering they have something, that feel that they've been gaslit all their lives, they've been dismissed all their lives. There was a lady, she said that she was dismissed, getting diagnosis at 39 was her life froze at first because she knew that there was something wrong. And you have someone like Asha on TikTok, and he talks about the fact that when they gave him his ADHD medication, his parents flogged him and said, well, you're acting up in school, right? Nobody is praising you. And those were words I got told also. Nobody is praising you. And we don't understand how those words affect adults. He said when he got into his 20s and he had control of his diagnosis and things like that, he went and got the medication and his life was on a better path. I have a testimonial from another girl that says, just the same way I said I was curious and I was searching. She was just searching for answers. So she got her diagnosis at 28. And she informed her parents. Her parents are like, yes, we are aware you got diagnosed as a child, but we decided to just pray about it. So she's like, I've had to suffer since I was 7 for 20 years. How do you forgive somebody for that? I think people fail to understand that there is support and help for us. Like that, I know where to go when I need support. These things are not readily available on our radar for so many reasons. And what we have to do is kind of signpost people, make it available, talk to our communities. Looking for opportunities for us to go into the community and have real authentic conversations with people. If they choose to hear, they hear. If they choose not to, they don't. But at least that opportunity has been given and has been held. People need to be held accountable for what they've done to children. From the pastors that are telling people that, oh, they just want to put your child on medicines. But medicines were created by God. I take 13 medication every day. And when some people see that I take medication like that, oh, you're a child of God, should not be living like this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's sad the way our community
Yeah.
shuns people that have invisible illnesses. I told somebody once that I wish there was a time when I was confused. I read my journal to Emma Sunday that I was saying, God, if I had cancer or I was in a wheelchair, people will understand more.
Yeah. I
And
think
many
that
people
is,
have that.
I think this, yes, you've touched on so many things. And I think a lot of the things that, if I just summarize the things that we've talked about today, thank you so much for sharing your journey, because that's highlighted a lot of things that were going on from your life, from very early life, the challenges you've had in childhood, at home, at school, with peers, you navigating life and trying to discover yourself, you not really knowing your true self because you were always having to adapt to what was going on, to the point where, you had this journey of, having had several other chronic illnesses and diagnoses, and still just wondering why, you were different in the way you responded to things, to also the reactions from people who you saw gave you different reactions, people dismissing your acknowledgement of what was going on with you, people doubting the diagnosis, people telling you, you don't have faith, different reactions. And we can see how all these things go to influence, people and families. I've certainly known families where they were hindered from going for assessments because of responses from their community. And you've helpfully told us about what having a diagnosis meant and how you have adapted with that diagnosis, the support you got, and how you are also helping to advocate for the neurodivergent community across board with the medical professionals, educating students and also policymakers, realizing that people who are neurodivergent need this support. And I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
I just want to say, well done, well done. You've also identified the barriers within the community. You've highlighted that there's still a lot of work to do. You'd like to go into our community. And also the impact. You've touched on a very important thing, the consequences of a child not being diagnosed when they should be, and how that can shape their lives, and how that can impact on them accessing the support that will help them to be successful and reach their potential. So you've touched on so many useful things, and I just hope that our listeners today have gotten a lot from your talk today, because I think it was useful to bring you in as an adult who has had to navigate these difficult processes as a child, and to see what happened for an adult who has navigated barriers and challenges with getting that diagnosis up to the point where you are now, and also what it means. So when people say, does diagnosis matter? I think you've shown clearly that diagnosis matters, because it's through your diagnosis you've been able to have the support you've had. You've been able to find strengths in other things that you're doing now, which is being very, very, being an advocate, a strong advocate, which is telling your story and your own lived experience, has been very, very useful for so many. So I just want to say a big thank you, DK, a big thank you for sharing this with us today, because I know so many people would be impacted by your story. So many people would want to learn. So many people would want, would would be really motivated by your story. So, like we said, you are, you're doing a lot of work. You are you're an advocate. You've got your professional space as well, where you help people to be the best. So if people want to also reach out to you directly, could you just let us know how they can do that?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. I think it was a wonderful conversation. I wasn't sure what direction it will go, but as usual, I just showed up and did. That's my motto. If you want to reach me, Instagram is my favorite place. DK Jonah. DKJonah.com also is my website. And I'm going to be, I think I just decided to start writing more blog posts about self-diagnosis and things like that, conversations that we're having in the community. And I would love to hear from you. Just send me a DM on Instagram, DK Jonah. So that's the letter DK, then JONAH. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, I encourage people to reach out to DK because there will be adults, I'm sure, who will be listening to this who have struggled in their journey, who want to have a chat with you. I think that it would really be good because I keep saying no matter what you read, people read, when you talk to somebody with a lived experience, there's nothing that beats that. And if people have questions, especially if families out there have children, they're not sure about how to access help, and I would encourage people to check our school doctor website, which is www.school-doctor.com. It has a wealth of resources. This is a social enterprise with my co-host with other colleagues, which I co-host with other colleagues about neurodevelopmental issues, and we also offer assessments for people who want to access that. We do a lot of work with schools because we believe in bridging that interface between school and family, and so we have had lots of schools working with us and sending children that they're concerned for assessment. So you can contact us through that, and you can also contact us through our podcast and contact details as well. And intervention matters. So I just want to say a big thank you for all of you for listening in this evening. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you during our next podcast session, which will be soon. Thank you. As we always say, early intervention leads to better outcome. And early intervention can only be achieved by early diagnosis. So thank you for listening into the series today. I know some of the things we've talked about today would probably have generated some questions or need to seek clarification. So I'm happy to take questions, and I'll invite you to send your questions to eim@drtakon.com. Thank you for listening in.